brag about my family a little bit this afternoon. My name is Bolivar Fraga. I go by Bo. It's a nickname that I got the first day of kindergarten at the Pleasantville Elementary. And I'm here this afternoon, as Diane stated, with my father, Felix. And we're going to share with you about our family. Very much proud of our family and what we've done here in Houston, that we're part of this great community and definitely part of the Houston story. And I think our city, despite the challenges that we face today, continues to be a place of opportunity. And this is a great city. And I think, you'll find in our family story, I think you'll find similarities to your own, or definitely somebody you know, but definitely a place where people come from other parts. In the case of our family, from Mexico. And that we've worked hard here, benefited from a great philanthropic spirit, and we definitely see that here at the medical center. Just being informed that the donor was given $150 million for a new facility. Am I correct? Right? So definitely a great spirit that's here in Houston to build upon. So my dad and I are going to do this together. He'll fill in a lot of the details. And I start with an image there from 2001, when my father Felix and two of my uncles, Angel and my uncle Lupe, who I call Champ, were honored by the Mexican American Bar Association of Houston, or MABA, that year in their gala. And in this picture, this collage, there's a lot going on. When my father was appointed to the Houston Housing Authority, is that correct? Yeah. Right? Mm-hmm. Here I am as a little boy, Mayor Hoplines, my older brother Carlos, my mom Nellie. My dad being recognized by then First Lady Bush for a lot of work in the community. My uncle Lupe, or Champ, started a small business here called Tejas Office Products, and he's being recognized here on the cover of Hispanic Business Magazine. My uncle Angel, who couldn't be here today, when he was a judge here. And so quite a bit going on in this photo, along with several other community leaders that were also being recognized that evening. And my uncle asked me specifically to read from two quotes from that evening, from the introductions that were made for my dad and my uncle. First, Mr. J. Evans Atwell, former managing partner for one of our law firms here in Houston, Vincent & Elkins, said about the Fragas: "The fabulous Fraga family is truly a crown jewel in our community. They have over a half a century made manifold contributions at every level." And then former Texas Secretary of State Jack Raines, who introduced my uncle specifically, Lupe, said, "The Fraga family is an outstanding family. I've known them since the 1950s, and they exemplify what's right about America and what's right about this state. These are people who believe in the American dream, who prove that it works, and they stand as an example of what our system allows us to do." So definitely quite an honor to hear that, and humbling at the same time. So as I mentioned about Houston, being a place of opportunity, and I think that it's definitely, here that our family's been able to do well. We start with, on the Fraga side, my grandparents, Felix and Angela Samarron, were immigrants from Mexico, from San Luis Potosí. Anybody else from or heritage goes back to Mexico? I'm sure it's got to be. Anybody San Luis Potosí? No? You've been there? Monterrey, Nuevo León, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yes.
So my grandparents were from the state, San Luis Potosí, which is considered central Mexico. And my grandfather came in 1913 as a young man, came because of the Mexican Revolution. That Mexican Revolution started in 1910, and a lot of immigrants came because of the revolution. And the first few years of it were pretty bad. I mean, it spanned until 1920, so 10 years, but the first few years were quite years of a lot of violence in the people in Mexico. So my grandfather came in 1913, and I think what's very interesting, especially considering the debate that's still going on about immigration reform, is that when he crossed the border at Eagle Pass, he just had to pay 5 cents for the toll, and then he registered on the Texas side. He didn't have to show any kind of proof of who he was or any immigration papers. And then in the 1920s, it was when the U.S. started requiring visas to come in. I think 1924 was the first time that our government started requiring visas to come in. And so prior to that, basically, you just showed up. So all these stories, especially going through Ellis Island, people that came through just came with whatever they had. And we hear stories about how names got changed because of the pronunciation, especially some of those German, Russian, Jewish names that are hard. But when my grandmother came in 1924, then in 1925, and she actually had a visa. And one of the things I'm interested in is finding out what were the requirements back then to get visas to enter into the country, because I know today, given their status as poor people from Mexico, they surely today wouldn't have fulfilled the financial requirements to get a visa to enter. It's very difficult to enter the U.S. legally, and so hence the situation we're in. And so I keep that in mind. I always want to share that with other people. Look back in your history, your immigration history, to know like what did my great-grandparents, my grandparents, what did they need to come to this country, and what brought them here, and so forth, to try to understand today. And it's making a very personal editorial comment here, if you will, but I don't think people come illegally just to break our laws. That they just, they're coming here because that's really no other alternative. And if you ask them, they say, well, I went to the U.S. consulate in Monterrey or the U.S. Embassy in Mexico City, and I couldn't get the visa because I didn't have X, Y, and Z, but I need to come and find work. So I do think back, especially my grandfather, just 5 cents across the bridge into Texas, and that was it. I know the situation is different today, but I think we need to keep that in mind, especially, again, those of us who are definitely have that immigrant story in our family. So they met here actually in Texas and married in the 1920s. And they had six boys. And we start with my Uncle Joe and my Uncle Frank. My dad Felix was number 3. And then my Uncle Angel, Uncle Tom, and my Uncle Lupe are up to 10. And this picture, do you remember the exact date of this picture, 1960 something or earlier?
Yes, about 1960, yes.
Yeah. So, and I think this was a house in Denver Harbor.
No, it's Second Ward, across the street from Senega's Park.
Do you want to share about, so that time a lot of the Mexicans that were coming, like my grandparents, were settling in the Second Ward, which isn't not too far from here, but on the east side of downtown. And it was definitely, it's one of the hearts of the Mexican community here in Houston. Do you want to go ahead?
Okay. Yes, I was talking about the wards. Houston originally was set up as 4 wards. The first one, second ward, and third ward were in west of east of Maine, and first ward and fourth ward were in the west of Maine. And that was a whole city within, I guess, about a mile, and that's all it was. In fact, the wealthy people lived, the lady that started our community center, Mrs. Alice Graham Baker, lived in the wealthy part of town, and that was over where Maine and Bell is. I don't know if you'll know Maine and Bell. The
Metro building?
Yeah, the Humble building. I used to call it the Humble building. The Exxon building. That was the part of town where the wealthy people lived. And the second ward finally became one of the low-income neighborhoods of the city of Houston. In most parts of the world, the more money you have, the closer you live to downtown. In our country, I don't know, Houston anyway, the poorer you were, the closer you lived to downtown. Because I guess they started the city with homes around downtown, and as it got better, the wealthier people moved away and left the place for the low income. So Second Ward early on was one place where the Mexican American people came to live. And still, it's a Mexican American neighborhood. Second Ward. Okay. Yeah, let me sit here and get up. Let's say, call on me.
So my grandfather, as it came in 1913, he worked on the railroads, and definitely, that's the railroads is what made Houston what it is. Just as a great city. And my grandmother was a homemaker, but definitely the values of hard work. That I think so many of us immigrants, and just think, Houstonians in general share. Still today, you talk about if you come to Houston and work hard, you can make it happen here in this city. Compared to other cities in the U.S., I think it's like that's more visible here or more true. Okay, so of the 6 of them, the ones that are the most well known, it's my Uncle Angel, Lupe, and my Uncle Felix, but there's obviously 3 other uncles that are that are part of the family and also very important and have contributed to the family. So the two oldest went off to fight in World War II. My uncle Joe, the oldest, was in the U.S. Army Air Corps as a mechanic and was over in Europe, in Italy, I think in Italy when the war was over. And then came back and got married and started his family. He passed away in 2000. And then my uncle Frank joined the U.S. Navy and was in the Pacific. And he made it a career. He stayed in the Navy for a full military career, which is at least 20 years. And then an interesting story was that he enlisted when he was 16. So he was actually underage. But then this is 1942. So I mean, we obviously needed men to go into the this is the height of World War II, and they weren't too, I think, too concerned about people's ages, but he enlisted. And my grandmother was actually featured in the Chronicle at that time during World War II, because besides her two sons, I think she had 10 nephews that also went off to the war, so she was featured as having 12 men in the family that went off to World War II. So, I think I forgot two there, World War I, sorry, so World War II. Yeah. So definitely something that we're proud about in our family. So. And then also very important to for my Uncle Joe, as the oldest, and then my dad, being number 3, is that he convinced your parents to let you go on college later on after high school?
Yes.
So the two of them dropped out. I think that's always the case in some, our families that the oldest always sacrifice, especially, generations ago, more so for the ones that come up following them. So. Then there's my Uncle Tom, who lives in Austin, and he's number 5 in the birth order, but he went on to A&M, and then he was in the Air Force, and he did a full career in the Air Force. He retired as a lieutenant colonel, but in this picture it's from Vietnam, and he was a major at the time in 1968 in Vietnam, and flew this aircraft there called the OV-10, which is mainly for reconnaissance. It's also a light attack type of aircraft. But he served in Vietnam and then retired in the late 1970s as a lieutenant colonel. So he's also very much been part of that service that our family has given as a whole. And then there's my Uncle Angel, who's number 4 in the birth order, has been a judge here at, that's his county criminal court. Yeah. So, and then he's been a lawyer. I think he just celebrated his 50th year of being a lawyer here in town. His own practice, and he continues also being very involved in the community. This picture is, I think, late 80s, but it's a great picture. We've got all 6 of the brothers there. So, anything you want to add? And then there's my Uncle Champ, or Lupe. He also went on to A&M. So backtrack just a little bit. My dad was the first to go on to college, and I'll get to that.
First one to finish high school.
First one to finish high school too. Yeah, my 2 uncles, the 2 eldest ones dropped out, went, fought the war. And then my dad finished high school, went on to college, and then all the ones following went on to college. So my dad's a big proponent. If you get the first one to graduate high school, usually, does that ring true in some other families here? Do you mind sharing?